Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino here again with another episode of Deep Listens. And today, we are going to be discussing Hades 2, the second Hades game by Supergiant Games, one of the rare occasions where the Deep Listens podcast has played the second game after the first game. And it is currently in early access. If you are listening to this podcast in the far-flung future, the version we played was after unpatched, and then after the very first patch. That is the time period in which we are recording this. So if other things have come out, other things have happened, if you're just listening and you're like, I can't believe they're not talking about the city building system, it's because it didn't exist yet. Like, we're going to do our best to talk about what we played, but we are fairly certain this game will look significantly different by the time it is complete and baked. Joining me, as always, to discuss all things video games, I am joined by Pete Busby. Hello, Pete.
Hey, how's it going? Excited to talk about the sequel, as Gino said, of a game we've played. This week's fun fact might be fun, depending on how you feel about it. So how familiar are y'all with J. Edgar Hoover?
He invented the vacuum? The Hoover vacuum?
Yes.
That's about all I know. Yeah.
Yes.
That's him?
So J. Edgar Hoover, famed head of the FBI for like 40-some years, incredibly popular while he was alive, and derided as a monster ever since then. But it's sort of hard to say definitively, but many historians will say allege J. Edgar Hoover was gay, despite persecuting gay people. Those aren't the fun facts. Those are terrible facts. The fun fact is J. Edgar Hoover also had one of the largest collections of pornography in history.
Oh.
Yeah, but in suitable J. Edgar Hoover fashion, instead of just using it to, get off like a normal person, he used it to blackmail people because it's terrible.
Oh. Wait.
Okay.
How?
So like a lot of like celebrities or like people of note either appeared in, like, they call them blue films at the time, or just there were nudes floating around. Like, allegedly J. Edgar Hoover had some of Marilyn Monroe, and he just used them to be a monster like he does.
Okay. I was thinking...
This isn't a fun fact. That's
No.
a mean fact.
Yeah, it kind of derailed again.
I was thinking that J. Edgar Hoover, like, left a porno mag on the floor, and if you picked it up, he's like, I gotcha! And he just had a lot of honeypots lying around everywhere.
That's
Would
the
not
Metal
be
Gear
shocking.
Solid 5 approach.
Yes, I was thinking it was a Metal Gear situation. If you bent down, he grabbed you and he put you in a locker. Is it Folsom? What is the thing? He put the little backpack on you and a little balloon came and snagged you. Folsom?
Something like that.
Fulton? Whatever that is.
Fulton. Yeah, the Fulton.
Yeah, he'd put a porno down and then he'd strap a little backpack on you, and then you're in outer heaven, or an FBI black site. That other voice you've heard is the mistress of games herself, M. Palladino. How are you doing, Em?
I'm doing okay. I don't know if you can hear my cat screaming at me.
No.
She wants my ice cream.
Are you giving it to her?
No.
Okay.
She does not get ice cream.
That's fair.
Anyway, other than that, glad to play a second Hades. I liked the first one, and they sure made a second one.
That they did. And we are also joined because we are playing a game full of grinding and also made by Supergiant Games. I thought we should bring in an expert. We'd bring in a ringer. We are joined by the Grindfather himself, one Billy Rothert, original host of Deep Listens. Welcome back, Billy.
Hey, friends. Great to be here. So excited to be talking about one of my favorite genres of games, the action roguelite made by one of my favorite game companies, Supergiant Games. It is awesome to be back.
Excellent. So before we get into the game, Why don't we just start with, hey, Billy, what's going on? How you doing?
Hey, friends. You know, it's
Hi,
been
Billy.
like it's been maybe like a year or so. Maybe not quite a year. Maybe like eight months or something since my last appearance. Things have been going great. For those who have been following the saga since the beginning, I've always been passionate about education, and in 2021 or something, I made the big leap from my previous career running a small business to being an educator. So I'm a teacher now, and I changed schools this year to one that's a little bit closer to home. I got married last year. That's crazy,
That's true.
And then wouldn't you know it, we're expecting our first baby later this year. So I'm just like, a lot of adult
Woo.
things are happening, and I don't mean
Elon Musk
adult.
is so excited.
Yeah. When I say adult things are happening, I don't mean it in the J. Edgar Hoover sense. I mean it like I'm a grown man and I'm doing grown man things, like looking for houses and getting married and having babies. It's bizarre.
You do big boy things. You make big boy noise.
I know, I wear a belt every day now.
What?
It's just
Terrifying.
it's
No, never.
on the other side. It's just I can't describe the view. They should have sent a poet.
Excellent. Well, congratulations, Billy. Looking forward to reports on child rearing from Billy. I'm sure you'll be an expert. You'll be a great dad. So congratulations.
Can't wait. My future daughter is destined to be part martial artist, part cheerleader, all gamer. So, it's going to be a wild ride.
That's a heck of a multi-class. All right, before we discuss Hades 2, our normal plugs, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens, which would get you access to our Discord. We are rapidly approaching having to play Mass Effect Andromeda, which is our 40 patron goal that we are aiming towards. That will be co-ownership between us and the Off the Deep End crew, because it is bad enough for them, and also in a series that we are familiar enough that it's co-ownership. So go ahead, and if you get in the Discord, you'll hear about the exciting new merch that's coming soon. You can also get some games into the slush pile for the Off the Deep End crew. You could join our fantasy basketball next year. Maybe you can be the person who forces us to play a weird game if you were able to beat me. Only one person has been able to so far, but they were able to make us play Trials of Mana.
I was very close.
You were, but you didn't.
You're at 500. You're 1-1.
Yeah.
I was second, and then I was tied for first last year. Look, we've only done it twice, and I've won one of them. That's pretty good.
Okay.
That's a great batting average if it was a batting average. But it's a terrible survivorship rating, I feel like. So, it really depends on what average you apply to it. And, if you got into the Discord, you might end up on the Discord report. The Discord report.
Boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. My internet was cutting out.
No, it's fine. It's not the Discord report if we don't boopy-doopy-doopy-doopy-doop. So I just had to make sure.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, thank you for...
Is that like the
covering
news
for me.
anchor transition jingle?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
Behind the scenes, I used to put some music in there, and that was how I knew where to put the music. But then I realized that it needs you to leave a credit for it, and so I stopped doing that, and now I just go boop a doop a doop a doop.
Man, how far we have fallen. Can't even get a jingle. We used to have a break in the show with a transition theme.
I think the fans like it better.
We've gotten emails where people are like, I like the boopy doopy 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 doop. And we're like, okay, we'll leave it.
All right,
now it's
if
a
you
quirk.
like
Okay,
it.
listen. The audience
Yeah.
knows what they want. How dare I say anything about it? Carry
Look,
on.
Stockholm Syndrome is powerful,
Mhm.
and we're employing it. So what's going on in the Discord?
Anyway, This week on the Discord report, we watched The Beekeeper. How was that? I didn't tune in. for that.
Terrible.
How
Terrible.
you shut your mouth?
You don't like it?
No.
How dare
What's
you?
wrong with it?
What did you take issue with? Did you not believe in the power of the bees?
Has Jason Statham always had such fine eyebrows? That's not my
Yes.
issue with the
Yes.
film. It's just one thing I noticed.
Yes, but that's a weird thing to be mad about. That's just how that man
I'm not
looks.
mad about it. It's a dumb movie. It's a dumb movie, and I hated it.
No,
Yeah.
I think you're
Gino's-
saying it weird. It's a dumb movie. I love it.
Gino's comment in the Discord was, "It's one of the best dumb action movies I've seen." So
What?
It's so
There you go.
stupid. He
It
needs, to,
is.
he needs to protect the hive. There's so many
Yeah.
puns.
Through extrajudicial killing, sure.
Yeah,
I get the premise.
it's
that's
great.
every Jason Statham movie, though.
Yeah, and Jeremy Irons is like a weird CIA simp. I get it. I'm not confused about the movie.
You didn't like him protecting the hive. You didn't like when they did a drive-by of a beehive and it sent him off the edge.
I didn't like any of it.
You didn't like when he killed a
Oh,
man with a jar of honey.
Again, I get it. Like I understand the premise.
Well,
Okay, well, this house is divided now.
isn't it always? Other things going on the Discord. Are there any other things going on the Discord?
I mean, you can always just.
we
there's
filled
always-
2 weeks with just B movie questions.
We could watch B movie.
Oh man.
Oh, excuse me, Beekeeper.
Beekeeper. There was something that ZP wanted me to read to you, but I don't want to do that. Pete.
What's the highlight? Is this just like pro capitalism again?
No.
Which channel was it even in? I can't find it anymore.
I think it was in Game of the Week.
Oh, here it is. Yeah. DP says, someone please read this meme to Pete during the next podcast. We have the angry video game nerd holding Hegel's Phrenology of the Spirit. And I would have to do an impression.
Yeah, it's what if the angry
You have to
video
do an
game
impression of
nerd-
Hegel?
What if
No,
the angry video game nerd,
nerd.
Reviewed Hegel's phenomenology of the spirit.
Yeah.
So maybe another time we'll read that. We had a longer intro than normal. I mean, the food
Yeah,
channel's
nobody.
still messed up.
The food channel has a banana pizza in it. This is apparently a Swedish thing.
Bananas on top.
Yeah.
Bananas are like in it. It looks like pinkish in the sauce. There's also a kiwi variant. This is a hate crime.
Yeah.
And
We did have
we should not.
There was
feature it.
one good thing from the food channel, which was apparently Google AI is not good at its job right now.
Good.
And so
Yep.
someone asked how to stop cheese from sliding off a pizza, and Google AI suggested that you should add Elmer's glue to the sauce to hold the cheese on.
I'll keep it on there.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was.
Who
that
knows
was
what
good.
else it will do? But
So that was what's going on in the Discord. In terms of my obsession of the week, I watched a show. We watched The Beekeeper. That was good. I enjoyed that. What a good film. I also watched The Other Guys again. I don't know if it's been my
That's a
obsession
good
of the week
one.
before, but that movie's very good. It was on
It is.
Netflix, and they warned me that it was leaving, and I was like, I need to watch it one more time then. It's a great action comedy with Will Ferrell and unfortunately Mark Wahlberg, but the movie's very good, and it's very it's weirdly prescient. It's a movie about how cops are probably like the copyist cops are not the people you want to support. It's really like the IRS people who are maybe doing more meaningful work. And also it's a funny movie with a lot of goofs. So yeah, check out The Other Guys if you've got a chance. All right,
Is it
now
off Netflix by now?
it's still there, I think, right now.
Okay. Depending on when you hear this podcast.
Yes.
Asterisk.
Yes, but go watch it. It's very funny. A lot of good recurring bits in that movie, and it's got maybe the greatest deployment of the Foo Fighters' "My Hero" that there's ever been. And it's in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie. So once you start hearing the intro to "My Hero," know that you're going to see one of the funniest scenes of the last 20 years. All right, without further ado, Hades 2, the second Hades game. Em, you picked it. Why? What's up with this game?
Hades 2.
So Hades 2. Pete.
Yes.
Hades 2.
Hades 2.
Why
It
did
is
you
the
play it?
Second Hades.
Yes.
So we played Hades 1, I think all around. We all enjoyed it.
We
very
did.
much so. So Hades 2 is, as you might have guessed, the sequel. So basically what goes down is you play Melanoy,
Yes.
a chthonic nymph. I think we all learned the term chthonic for the first time playing this game. It's related to the underworld. She is the granddaughter of Hades and the daughter of the character from the last game. And you're basically running it back, right? You're traveling through the underworld. You're killing monsters to eventually fight Kronos, the Titan of Time, who killed, presumably, your family.
Yeah. Kronos is Melanoy is Zagreus, the main character from Hades 1's sister.
Excuse me. I don't know
and-
how I got daughter.
She is Hades' daughter, so she is another
Got it.
child of Hades. She is
Mixed it up.
Zagreus was trying to kill his father. Melanoy is trying to save her father, who's been captured by Kronos, and her whole family has been.
He
captured
didn't
by
really
Kronos.
want to kill Hades. He just had to get out of Hades, the place.
Oh, man.
But then Hades was in the way, so
he just keeps killing his dad over and over and over.
he
and over
just
again.
keeps killing his father. Yes,
This is
but
the
now-
deep lore.
yeah. Well, if you played the game to the end, you would know this. Yeah, that was Hades 1. This is Hades 2. Somewhere off screen, Kronos has taken over, and you're just like dropped into the middle of it. So, and then you do action RPG things and roguelike things. It's basically the same stuff as Hades 1 with more. There's
Yes.
a lot more of it.
There's a lot more everything. So to start out,
Story.
this game is, like I said at the top, this is early access, so we don't even know how much there's going to be by the end of it. But currently, just like think Hades 1, you've got the boons, where as you're going on runs, different Greek gods are, dropping you off some buffs that can improve your run. It's almost all of the gods from the first game. A few got switched out, and a few new gods got switched in. You've got that system. You've got multiple weapons you can unlock. Each of the weapons has different move sets. You are unlocking tools so that you can extract things from the underworld. Those are all from the first game too. Except now there's even more crafting. There's perks in this game. The perk system is a little different. In the original game, you were just kind of like unlocking buffs that just made Zagreus better. In this game, it takes the form of tarot cards for the most part that you flip on and off. So in the first game, you could just go, oh, I just want more health or something. In this one, like there's a tarot card that increases your health or gives you regen or gives you death defiance. So it's a slightly different system than they had in the first game. And then they've got a ton of others. Oh, and there's also like a kind of dating sim sort of system like in the first game.
Friendship progression, similar to like a Persona game or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's
I don't
not
remember...
all dating.
At this point, I don't know that there's any dating yet. I have not gotten to a point where dating seems to be implied, though there was
Did you
dating in the first
Did you
game.
have any bathhouse scenes?
I did, but
I did.
I did
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
times.
Okay.
But you're not
Well,
you don't get a little
do you-
like thing that says you're dating now.
Uh-huh.
You weren't really dating in Hades 1 either. The two people who you can have like a romance scene with, it just kind of happens, and then you get some interesting dialogue for a while. I think it's more like a hookup, which is kind of more fitting for Greek gods because they kind of just bang each other sometimes in the lore.
They bang each other for lore reasons.
Yeah, to spice up the lore.
And would you say that the bathhouse scenes are romance scenes?
No, but I was wondering where you fell on that.
It's close. It feels like it's on the path.
Yeah. It's unclear because I only got like 1 or 2 hearts with most characters. Because after that they don't give you stuff. So I didn't think there was any reason to keep going. So maybe if you go all in on one, yeah, I'd have to test it.
Yeah, I'm assuming, like in the first game, if you got to the end of any of their relationship arcs, you usually got something above and beyond the like accessory that they gave you. So I'm trying that, but they also have a lot more options for how to woo people than in the first game. Like in the first game, you gave people nectar, and then once you got far enough along, you got this ambrosia item, and that was kind of the thing that usually sealed the deal on whatever their like final step was. In this game, you've got nectar and then bath salts to go take a bath with people. You've got fishing lures where you can go fishing with a friend. And then there's ambrosia. So there's like 4 different ways that you can go on. You can like raise a relationship, and some of the relationship levels are like locked behind certain items. So basically anything you saw in Hades 1, they expanded. They made more of it in one way or another. Was there even crafting in Hades 1? Do you remember, Billy?
There was item exchanging through the broker. There was no crafting insofar as like you mix up reagents to produce a result. And really, you're not like crafting items like you would in a game like, Valheim or Terraria or like Horizon Zero Dawn or something. You're not actually crafting for like inventory items. You're crafting to create a permanent feature.
Yeah, so in this game, they've added a crafting system, and the crafting basically means you've got a pick to go get metals, a shovel to go get seeds. You can get a tablet that lets you soothe shades, which gets you a resource that lets you increase the number of perks you can carry at once. And then you get a fishing rod to fish. And you can combine those items that you get. Some of these items you'll get from beating bosses. Some of them you'll get from, planting plants in a little garden you get in your home base. You can take the metals. There's other reagents you can get by, like, some of them you mix up. Some of them you do challenge runs and you get them. Like, it's a pretty varied. Some of them you just get on the runs, even if you don't have an extraction thing. Some of them are just lying around. Pete, did you find any of this crafting stuff overwhelming, interesting? Did you find it a meaningful addition?
I mean, I think my mileage varies for the most part. Like, I feel like I'm the person who just sort of like, this feels like a big menu. I'm just going to ignore it for a while. So, I mean, I did it when I felt like meaningful stat go up sort of moments. But, I spent a lot more time just trying to sort of like basically aimlessly grind until I had enough resources to buy better stuff, as opposed to like collecting, crafting materials.
And what did you think in terms of adding a crafting system to this game formula?
I mean, as far as like it being crafting, it's not like you're doing Minecraft, like putting items together. It's basically in a list format, and you're going like up the list, just making like the next thing you need to unlock in order to gain more progress. So like if you're going to, what are some of the upgrades?
Getting the ability to get nectar in the first place is one. Like,
That's true.
unlocking certain areas in the crossroads, which is your home base.
Yeah. Like
Learning
if you
how to
want,
distill darkness or whatever.
yep. If you want a fountain to be at the end of levels, you can upgrade for that. It's all stuff like that. Getting a place to put plants, which is a new thing too, growing plants, but seems to be in a lot of things these days.
That it does.
Yep.
That it does.
Everybody wants to farm.
Yeah. Children yearn for the farms.
Children yearn for the fields.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like centrally located, and so you don't have to like go out of your way to do it. There's like a big pot in the middle of camp. So every time you go back, there's like an exclamation mark over it, and then you just run up, and I usually just get whatever I can. And then next run, if I have more materials, do the same thing, and then you just accumulate like that. So it's not overwhelming. And there is the forget-me-not system, which is like you will see little markers when there's something you need for a recipe that you've marked, which is helpful. So like sometimes I'll be running around and then I'm like, oh, I do need like this random item. I need some ashes for whatever. And then you go and do that. And it's much better than trying to remember to do it every time you go out.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is, like, some of the items, the game nags you if you don't pick up all the items that are on screen at any given time. So most of them, like, the decision point is whether you're going to go into the area that might have that item in the first place. Like, if I need driftwood, and driftwood is on the screen on one of my runs, I'm not going to leave it behind, right? And in, like, the early version of the game that we played before the first patch, you had to choose whether you're going to take your pick, your shovel, your tablet, or your fishing rod. Like, it was a choice, and you basically couldn't harvest anything else. Even if it spawned, you just couldn't pick it up. Now they have it set up so you can harvest anything at any time, but which item you pick predisposes you to find more of that item, whatever it is, that class of item. So, like, the Forget-Me-Not I found meaningful when I had to choose between ashes or whatever the green stuff is, or bones. You know, if it was a reward that I actually had a choice about, that was meaningful. When it was, you know, am I going to dig this thing out of the ground with my shovel? The answer was always yes. I was always going to collect everything that I could find. So I think it's interesting. It's just less useful than I thought it would be. Like, you're never going out of your way not to pick up reagents.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing, Gino, is an appeal of the model that Supergiant Games has gone for, which is you're not going to a location like you are in, like I mentioned, some of these other games that have a crafting system like Minecraft or like Terraria or something. You're not heading to a biome to grind and get resources. You're just playing the game, and along the way you will encounter them and have some choice about which one you pick over the other, like Ashes or Psyche. I think it's pronounced like that. There's another pronunciation, but I think it's the Psyche version of the pronunciation. The one kind of issue that I have with this, and this is going to sound crazy coming from me because I'm the grind father, right? I love to know about the drop charts and everything. This is my shtick, but I actually have, I guess, like a preference of how they did it in Hades 1 as far as item-based progression a little bit, because in Hades 1, your main progression was gathering darkness from the bosses and from certain critical stages throughout the game. And what they did was, after you had defeated the game to a certain point, you stopped getting some of the other rewards and started getting more darkness, which kind of ramped your ability to make progress in your strength increasing permanent like buffs. So in Hades 1, it was the Mirror of Nyx, where you invested darkness into these perks and buffs. Now we're spending multiple different resources like ashes and cinders and pearls and and Psyche. There's like 4 or 5 different resources for your permanent buffs, and that's not inherently bad, but I'm saying I actually kind of feel like this is more grindy, but not for. I think it's like not an improvement.
I found it kind of tedious, honestly, to keep track of all of the things. Like, just off the top of my head, you need to get Psyche so that you can equip your perks. You need to get Ashes so you can unlock your perks. You can then convert Ashes into, like, wool or something. Like, there's, like, an upgraded version of Ashes that lets you upgrade your perks. You've got individual seeds. Those seeds can be turned into plants. Those plants are then reagents. There's different metals. And eventually, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the story, like, you eventually get choices about where you're going on your run every single time. In Hades 1, there was just one run. In 2, you're going to get choices. And when you decide to go on one route or another, some reagents just won't show up in each biome has its own reagents that are unique to it. So it's either or.
The universality of darkness as the resource, the currency you take out of a run, what makes it not a full roguelike, but like the roguelite version. The resource that you take out of the run was darkness in Hades 1. There's now many more resources, so you can't just kind of play a couple runs for fun, not pay too much attention to where you're going, and you'll just have the resources you need to get what you want to advance later in the game. Now you do have to be a little bit more thoughtful, which isn't like it's not bad. I think it opens up options for Supergiant to do other cool things with the reagents, but for the strict loop, like the engine of I go on a run, I bring back resources, I invest in to make myself stronger, to get more resources faster, and like that loop continues, that's a little bit worse for me right now.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, like, Pete, did you find that the game having these different reagents that are locked to certain biomes made you feel a little bit, I guess, unrewarded if you died before you got to that biome? Or if you got to the biome and the thing you wanted just wasn't there?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, so I mostly just sort of poured my efforts into like other currencies. You know what I mean? Because there's like so much stuff you can collect. You got your bones, you got your ashes, you got your psyche. So for me, like any sort of additional crafting in that cauldron was a bonus. You know what I mean? I think maybe me and Em approached this in a similar position where she was saying, whatever was available when you checked into that cauldron is what you did. And if I had it, cool. If I didn't, maybe we get it the next time.
Yeah, I think just what bugged me a little bit was just like when I would get to, if there was an item that I needed to get from Chronos, from like the very end, the last area of a given dungeon, it was annoying that I would have to, like, if I didn't bring the shovel and I needed both poppy seeds and marble, one of them's the thing you get with the pick, one of the things you get with the shovel. I need to now do 2 full runs, and the serving size of this game is like a half hour or more for a run. So, like, if I just didn't see a lot of resources from the final area, I need to now go through a couple of bosses, which, like, this game, I think it might be a little easier than Hades 1. It might just be from our experience, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit more. But it's a lot of investment to maybe not get the resources you need, whereas before, just doing a run, regardless of how much progress you made, you probably walked away with something useful. In this one, I don't need 50 nightshades, and I'm going to get 50 nightshades and 100 silver because that's what you get in the first area if you do a run.
Now, in Hades 1, the Wretched Broker kind of solved this problem for you because you would get resources that you didn't need immediately, because there were, in Hades 1, there were still some, I won't call them crafting items, but like required materials. You had nectar and ambrosia, and you had Titan's blood, and you had diamonds, and you had, there were some things that you needed to get in Hades 1, but every single one of those items could be exchanged for or upgraded into the item that you were looking for. So in a run of Hades 1, no item is useless because it could all be exchanged at the broker for the item that you wanted. Now, it worked in kind of a pyramid scheme, so if you needed to get Titan's Blood, it required like 30 diamonds, but when you got those easier to acquire resources, eventually, like, they wouldn't be worthless to you. You could trade them in for the resource that you want. And like Gino was saying, you're probably just going to accumulate a bunch of plants that you don't need and a bunch of metal that you don't need. And currently, I don't see a way to liquidate those for value. Which,
you can sell them for bones at the
yeah,
record
so
broker,
you
and
can sell
then
them for bones.
You could turn
Is
those
that true
bone-
for all of it, or just for the flowers?
You can do it for all of it. You can sell almost anything for bones, but then those
Okay.
bones can't buy everything. So
Right.
You can turn
So
it into Psyche.
You can't
or
turn
Ash.
anything into anything, but you can turn anything into something, and so that's a little bit of a downgrade.
Yeah, it's just that, like, once you get to the later levels of upgrading, you need a lot of some of these items. Like, you might need like 8 poppies, and poppies are that's what you get from seeds from like the very final area. And if you need 8 of those, you might need to do like 2 or 3 runs to get those 8. And, that's an hour and a
And
half.
you might die before you get there.
Yeah, you might just die because stuff happens in this game. It's a run-based
So
game.
maybe it takes 6 runs. You know, who knows?
And I found that to be a little bit more frustrating. And this is honestly stuff that it's early access, right? Like, some of this stuff might change. So, Billy, you're the only person here who had experience with Hades 1 in early access. What sort of changes happened to that game throughout the early access process?
So I was I was in the earliest phases of Hades 1. I can't remember exactly how early I was able to get in, but I do have like records of my messages in the Discords from like 2019, like kind of mid 2019 or something when they were developing. We know Hades 1 as it is now with the biomes that it has. We've got the House of Hades, Tartarus, then you go to Asphodel, then you go to Elysium, then you go to the Temple of Styx, then you go to the surface. And each of those biomes can end with like one of like 3 or 4 different types of boss encounters. Like the Furies at the end of the first biome in Hades 1, it could be any combination of 1, 2, 3, or a combination of 2 or 3 of them. And there's different iterations of the Hydra in Asphodel, and there's different, iterations of Theseus and the Minotaur in Elysium. And even I think even Hades has some different aspects of them from one run to the next. But at the very early access, it was just one boss at the end of Tartarus, Meg, no bells or whistles that could be added, and one version of the Hydra. So, and that was the end of the game. The end of the game was just 2 biomes, and now here we have like 5.5 biomes or something, like at the early access phase. So strictly in terms of biomes, there's lots more biomes in this early access than there was before. There were fewer weapons at the very early access than there are now. I think we only had 4 weapons in the earliest access, and I think we have 5 or maybe even 6 now.
5 right
5. Now. Okay. In the early access, most, if not all, characters that weren't like Hades and Zagreus and maybe Meg, I don't remember everyone, but they all had no character art and just had like the same portrait. We see that right now in this iteration of the game. If you bump into somebody like Narcissus, who has a very generic character portrait, they're like a cloaked figure, and they'll just change the color scheme. That's true for like the keepsakes now. They're all just rings with alphabet letters like A, B, C, D on them because they're placeholders until they get the real art, assets finished. That's true in Hades 2. It was like more of that in Hades 1. So we had even fewer art assets ready at early access than we do now. So like lots more characters have their full art compared to Hades 1's early access. I guess I should also say what Hades 2 has only been in early access for like 3 weeks at the time of recording, right?
Yeah,
Maybe even
we're
2
playing
and some
this
change.
almost completely out of the gate.
Yeah, so
I think it was literally I picked it the day after it came out.
Mhm.
So
Right. So it's still really, really early, but at this phase of early access compared to Hades 1's phase of early access, Hades 2 has way more content preloaded. And just to comment about how early access went and like how the players could get involved, Supergiant Games has a Discord server, and what they would do for Hades 1, and they're doing this now for Hades 2, is every certain period of time, it might have been 1 week, it might have been a certain day of the week, and they opened up this particular channel, but you could give feedback. And there were rules about how you could give feedback, and depending on the quality of your feedback, other Discord members could go like comment or upvote or something your feedback, and the highest, like the feedback that got the most positive engagement for like a suggested change or an issue that could be tweaked very likely made it into the game. I was really looking for, because I remember there were like 1 or 2 feedbacks that I got high interaction for that ended up being in the game. They weren't like major key features, but they were like tiny features. But they've deleted that that channel out of their Discord server for Hades 1. There is one up for Hades 2, and so at certain intervals, it'll unlock. All the members of the Discord could go in and provide feedback. Some of the feedback was then received by the development team and implemented. And when they put patch notes out, there'd be like a little icon saying, this particular change came from player feedback from our Discord. And I think they're doing the same thing now in Hades 2. There's like a little chat bubble icon next to the patch notes that came specifically from the Discord from player feedback, which is awesome. Like, I think that's such a great way to engage with your community and have your community directly influence how your game is played. Because some people would say, well, this is going to sound too dramatic for what it was, but they would say, hey, this thing isn't fun. And they say, okay, heard, we're going to take that out or tweak it or revamp it. So most things were great. Hades 1 had massive positive feedback from the player base. I remember from being there. But and it seems like it's largely very, very positive for Hades 2, save a couple of like points of contention among the community, which are largely just gripes. But I love the model that they're employing, and I hope they continue.
yeah. Looking at the patch notes, it looks like almost all of the things that were implemented in patch 1 was inspired by community feedback. So that's very nice to see. Like everyone has a little I don't even know what this is, little megaphone marker, and that's what the community generated. There's only like 2 that don't have that, so nice.
Yeah, they've been listening, and I think that it's by and large been. We'll see more improvements. Like this game started. If Hades 1 started kind of bare bones and slowly built up, this game is already starting at kind of maximum early access game. You know, it's got a crafting system. You can fish. It's got a dating sim hook. You know, there's challenge runs. I'm sure that there's going to be a speed run timer or something like that. You know, like there's going to be a bunch of stuff that's like that. And then it's going to further refine, I think, like we saw with the very first patch that made it so that you can collect all of the different resource types in one run as opposed to just being able to collect one. Like that was a layup sort of decision. It was clear upon very quick amount of play that it was a feel bad to have, 4 different items spawn and you can only pick up one of them. And now they've corrected it. So I think that it's definitely going to refine. We're in kind of an odd point because we are before they can make most of the fixes that will eventually be obvious.
Yes. And this is a point of contention that I have with the rest of the games industry at large, because I think we're in kind of like a death spiral of early access for some games. And I think Supergiant Games is doing it correctly. I understand that there's kind of like, I shouldn't say new technology now because it's not new, but when a game is pitched on a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter, and then there's stretch goals and there's a roadmap for implementation and development. Sometimes it takes years for games to exit early access. I'm talking about games like Valheim that are still in early access despite them being out for like 5 years. I mean, that game's not in early access anymore. That game is what it is. And games like Pal World and the company that made Pal World, that made Craftopia, ages ago, I think they have 3 games that are in early access going all the way back to 2020, and none of them have come to fruition. So like the early access model, I think, is being contorted some, but Supergiant Games is perfectly doing it. This game is 80 to 90% done as is. Yes, there are some biomes clearly missing, but like I think they're genuinely at the tweak phase because most of the game is there. Whereas some games will say, "Hey, this game's in early access. Like we're kind of developing it on the fly. Hope you're cool enough to pay us money in advance, and maybe we'll finish it." Like,
Pete, as someone who like hasn't, have you played any other games in early access before?
Let me think. Probably not.
How do you feel playing a game that cannot be finished right now, right? Like there's biome, there's end of the game. If you beat certain bosses, the game just kills you and says you're done. You've had enough, go home.
Right.
How do you feel playing a game in a state where it is unbeatable and seeing bugs that eventually will be addressed but aren't addressed yet?
Right. The unbeatable thing doesn't bother me for the like specific reason that I have no problem just stopping playing a game or like watching a thing. Like I don't know how many shows I've gotten to the end and have like 2 episodes. Like Naruto, I watched like 600 episodes of that and I have like 3 left and I've just never bothered to finish it for whatever dumb reason. So like that doesn't bother me, the
You're
unfinished
fine.
quality.
You basically saw everything. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't really care what happens with Sasuke and Naruto's fight, to be perfectly frank. Setting that aside, the bugs thing does bother me somewhat. Like that, I'm not assuaged by the fact that it's going to be fixed at some point. Although I do recognize this is a key part of the process to ensure hopefully this is a key part of the process to ensure the best game at the end. I still find myself annoyed.
Yeah, I mean, for me,
did you have very many bugs, Pete?
No, in this case, I didn't. So this was very clean.
Oh.
I'm just saying hypothetically.
Yeah, I had. So for me, it's a little odd. I might have played more before the first patch than you and Pete did. I think, based on how the conversation's gone. I ran into a few bugs that were addressed by the first patch, and then I've seen some bugs since. All of them are like polish bugs. They're not like game break. Like the game's never crashed, there's nothing that's like, oh man, this thing went out of bounds and now I'm dead or something, but I have had bugs where like I couldn't move Melanoy, like I could only dash, I couldn't run. I've had ones where like trying to activate some of the hexes, which is a new mechanic we should talk about. It's a new power that you get, like after you spend a certain amount of MP. Also this game has MP.
Yeah.
The original game had like items that you threw as your kind of ranged attack in a lot of cases. In this game, you have a magic pool. And after you've spent a certain amount of magic, because Melanoy is a witch, you can cast a hex, which is it's a special kind of boon that you can get from the moon, Selene.
It kind of replaces your ultimate from Hades 1. I think it was called God's Wrath or something. Yeah. No, it had a different name in Hades 1. I can't remember it now, but it's what your ultimate used to be in Hades 1.
And in this one, it's a buff you get from Selene. You can not get a hex on a run if you don't want one, unless you're forced to get her boon. But after you've spent a certain amount of MP, you get a super move basically. And some of those super moves, like when I've tried to use them, they've just not come out. Like the animation to cast the spell has started, and then at the end, just doesn't happen, which is a bummer. I've gotten killed a few times in boss fights just because I was gonna pop a hex that made me invincible, and then oops, didn't happen. So then you just get shot to death. There have been bugs where like most of them involve the I think it's Dark Shadow is the hex, where you become an invincible version of yourself with a different moveset. That one specifically has been buggy as heck. Like, I think that was the version that, like, before the first patch, it just, like, removed some of your boons. Like, for the rest of the room, if you popped that hex off, it would debuff you. Now that doesn't happen anymore. But now I've had some times where instead of switching to the other moveset, I still have my weapon out. So I'm invincible, but I'm still swinging my axe instead of shooting fireballs. I've had times where it just didn't happen at all. So instead of turning invincible, I just got shot in the face. There have been times when I think that one used to be what made me get stuck too. So it seems like that just might be extra buggy. But a lot of these things make me feel like, oh, I'm a beta tester. I'm paying to be a beta tester in a certain way. And yeah, I'm paying less than I would if I bought this game in a year. But also I'm like playing a version of the game where I don't know if the math on some of these runs, like accumulating some of those items, I don't know if what I'm doing is going to be the final game. You know, like some of these mechanics might get changed, they might get removed. And that's a little bit frustrating. But also what's frustrating is because there's not an ending, I'm building up all this muscle memory right now. And I'm not going to keep playing this game for the next 9 months. And they're saying that their current roadmap is that there'll be an end of the game within a year. So by the time there is an end, I might not have touched this game in like 6 months, and I'll have to relearn all that muscle memory. Like, I'll have unlocked a bunch of stuff to make the game easier for myself. But the odds of me picking it back up to see the ending, which for me, Supergiant games, I'm mostly playing for the writing. I'm mostly playing for the story. I'm not necessarily playing for the gameplay. The gameplay, I think, is very good for what, for the genre. I think it's excellent. But the thing that I am drawn to the most is the part that is probably going to come last. The tweaks that are like, oh, we're going to make the challenge runs better, or we're going to remove some bugs, or, we're going to rebalance the crafting. That's probably going to happen sooner because it just takes less time to toggle numbers and fix bugs than it does to produce story and make art assets. So like the people who are just playing this to be a run-based game are getting probably going to get more out of this early access period than me. And it just puts me in an awkward position.
I think that's something that I'm excited about. Supergiant's model. I hear your position and think it's a 100% legit position to take, that the likelihood of you picking the game back up just to replay it all from a fresh save might be low, or lower than it would be, because you're there for the Supergiant flavor. I am similar to you that I want Supergiant's flavor, but maybe what I can say as a reassurance is when I played Hades 1 and I could get to like Elysium, but Temple of Styx didn't exist yet or whatever. I don't remember how much I played the game a lot in early access. I played a lot of that game. I basically 100%ed what was available in early access, put it down for like 18 months or something. I think it was like, I was probably like dating or engaged to my now wife before I picked up that game again. And then I 100%ed it basically, because I saw that there was more content and more of the Supergiant goodness at all phases of the game throughout. So if that is a reassurance at all, I hope it is, because from what I've seen from Hades 1 early access to 1.0, and now what I'm seeing in Hades 2 early access to what I think will probably be 1.0, I think I'll have no problem kind of 100%ing what early access has to offer, and then putting it down for 6 months, a year, 18 months or whatever, and coming back and having no problem restarting the game from scratch, because I know there'll be lots more of everything that I want in all phases of the game. I won't have to like get to the end to see the new stuff, because they'll put it all throughout the entire game.
Sure. Do you see any tension? I mean, this is the same tension that would be in Hades 1. But do you sense any tension in the run-based nature of the game and its storytelling, where every time you die, you come back to the crossroads, you talk to people? Like, there is a lot more content in Hades
Yeah.
2 than there was in 1. So even if you're playing optimally, you're going to have maybe 2 to 3 times more runs to see all the stuff in Hades 2
Right.
than you would in 1. So like going to the crossroads, are you finding that the dialogue with the characters that are recurring is even more signpost or boilerplate than it was in Hades 1? Because there has to be so much more of it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at this point, like, let me check my game time really quick. I have put only like 12 hours into it, so I'm not like going crazy with it or anything.
Oh,
But-
shit.
What? What's
I
your?
just looked at my hours played.
Yeah. That's probably why you might be.
30?
Okay.
30. But
So-
I got up and left the game on pause for a little bit, so it's probably closer to 25, but still.
Okay. Well,
Left
Yeah,
the game
so-
on pause for 5 hours.
Well,
You
sometimes
know,
have
not-
to get up and
not all
Fine.
of it.
Just
like,
fine then,
one
27.
Put it
shot.
into sleep. Like, what are you doing?
fine 27.
Get out of there.
What are you, my mom? I'll leave my computer running whenever I damn well please. Thank you very much.
Anyway,
Whatever, man.
at like the point that I'm at where I only have put in like probably under 20 runs, I would say.
Mhm.
I did not find that there was like dialogue was getting stale. I do think that there's like enough variety that you can keep coming back, and there will be something new to say to someone. And if there isn't, maybe they're just not there. So it's constantly changing, like your little encampment. Sometimes you go off one screen and then you come back and something else is happening. Characters are talking to each other sometimes, which is, it makes it feel like lived in, I think. So I think that, like, I don't feel like the runs are difficult enough that I'm like, spending hours at one, like, go through, and then I'm like not coming back and getting nothing,
Yeah,
It's,
I definitely haven't felt like I'm coming back and getting nothing. I've felt like sometimes I am coming back and it's like, "Hey Nemesis, are you still mad about? Are you still mad at me? And are you still the god of vengeance or the goddess of vengeance?" She's like, "Yeah, I still hate you, and I'm still
Yep.
the goddess of vengeance and want revenge." And it's like, okay, cool.
yeah,
And I might have had a variant of that conversation with her 10 times at this point.
yeah,
And so, because I have to do so many more runs in this game, I feel like at this point, I'm speeding through the dialogue more than I was in the first game, just because the volume is higher on everything.
yeah. I mean, you are probably getting through it a lot faster, and there is also not as much variance as in Hades 1, because they like
They haven't built it
had
yet.
they had a lot more time with Hades 1 to add like little nuances to all the character conversations. Like I know that there was like some of the gods will comment if you have another god's boon already, stuff like that. So things of that nature that they haven't like, it's such an edge case that they're like not focused on that yet. Which
stuff's
I think
actually
is
in there.
like fine. Yeah, there is
That-
some in there. It's
Yeah.
it's probably not to the extent that Hades 1 had,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
yeah. But Nemesis is one of the characters that is a little one note, so there are a lot of variants of pretty much the same conversation, but it's a different conversation every time.
It
I
is
think.
technically different. Legally.
Yes. Legally, the words are distinct. There is no plagiarism going on here.
Pete,
But
did you have a point?
yeah,
No, I was just laughing at legally they're distinct conversations.
Okay.
Y'all are
Um,
funny sometimes.
Yay! We try. So one thing I feel like we should turn a little bit to the story now. What there is, at least so far. So Melinoy, main character, Hades and the family have been kidnapped. You start out trying to get out of some woods that are just kind of in the outskirts of Hades. The final boss of the first area is your mentor. Pete, do you remember who the mentor is? Hecate?
Hecate.
The goddess Hecate. Yeah, I forgot it was Greek. Hecate, goddess of the crossroads.
Yeah, so she fights you. She basically has one variant right now. It seems like most of the bosses are pretty much the same. Hecate will do her whole thing is she's got all of your hex moves, all your super moves, and she'll use a random assortment of them during the fight.
That is what she's doing. That never occurred to me.
Yeah, she turns invincible, and then she shoots the little floor beam, so she's got the dark side.
Yeah.
She turns you into sheep. She's got the hex. Yeah, she's got all that stuff. So like
that's the most annoying one, getting turned into a sheep.
It is.
It
That's
is
what killed
dodgeable,
me.
but
The
very
cutest
hard
most.
to dodge.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
very
annoying to dodge
fast.
for sure. So that section, I feel it's pretty straightforward. You'll get through it very quickly if you've played Hades 1. The second level in the regular run is maybe my favorite, Oceanus, because it's got my favorite boss. Pete, who's
Like
the
those
boss
sirens?
of Oceanus? Yeah.
It's the sirens and her backup band, the drums and the guitar.
It's what's her name? Circe?
Scylla.
Scylla.
Scylla and
Yeah.
the Sirens.
Yeah. That was
Named
very
after a famous whirlpool, I think, by Greece, or it's the rocks. There's Scylla and Charybdis. I'll look it up.
Yeah, so
It is
she is. Oh, go
Scylla.
ahead.
Scylla is a monster in Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Probably named other stuff after her, but it's like
Scylla is a legendary monster who lives on one side of a narrow channel of water opposite her counterpart Charybdis. Man, I'm so good at mythology.
Worthy of note, it's this boss fight where we get to hear one of the iconic features of Supergiant Games. The Ashley Barrett vocals.
Yep.
And I assume is Darren Korb composing again.
It is. Yep.
Yeah.
Her song has been released as a single on Spotify already. Coral Crown.
Makes sense.
And I love, so it's a run-based game. They play with the run-based nature of it by having dialogue with bosses kind of expand. And similar to how in the first game you fought the Bone Hydra and then you eventually named it.
Yeah.
Lermy. And then, you'd keep running into it and Zagreus would just have more one-sided conversations. In this one, Skill is like, oh, we're a band. We have a lot of fans. They just always end up drowning because we're sirens and we want to kill people. But we really, we're making change, girls. All of her dialogue's great. I love her self-obsessed pop star attitude. But they compose a new song after you fought them enough times. The original song is called Coral Crown, and it's trying to entice people to sailors to come and drown. The second song is I'm gonna claw out your eyes and drown you to death.
They specifically make fun of your dress too.
They do, and your hair.
like you found it in the garbage. I think they say it's very funny.
They said you found your dress in the trash. Your hair looks like something died there.
Yeah.
You keep coming back every night. You're so obsessed with me,
Mhm.
which is great. I just really enjoyed it. Pete, did you ever get the second song to pop off?
I did, and I do think, Gino, I agree with you. That area is the best, both for the music and it constricts in a way that I appreciate. Whereas the third area just blows it out, and it's a huge, massive environment you have to deal with. And I think Hades 2, probably Hades 1, if I went back and checked it, works better in a more confined environment.
I agree.
I do want to say one thing before we move on to the third area. One of the things I like about this boss fight is there's three members of the band. There's someone on drums. There's one playing guitar, and then Skilla does the vocals. And as you defeat each member of the band, the music changes. So if you defeat the one on the guitar and then the one on drums, then it will just be Skilla doing vocals without any backup, which was a very nice little detail.
I love that detail. One other detail, if you get the hex that lets you revive a dead enemy and you kill one of the backing band members, you can revive them. And then they will fight for you. And then Skilla will be like, what did you do to her?
That's so funny. I never tried that.
Yeah, I thought it would work too.
What
Supergiant Games never skimps on noticing where they could have a fun piece of character dialogue. And I'm sure the Supergiant crew is in the voice acting booth so much. Just like, what if we need to have this character interaction? What if this character meets that character? What would they say? Like, the writers are just going off at Supergiant. So I love that about them.
Yeah. Always crushing it. The area after that is the Fields of Mourning, which is a really big area. It's bigger than anything that was in Hades 1.
Asphodel was like the most similarly sized region, because there were some really big maps in Asphodel, but there were parts of Asphodel that were really cramped, like the Bone Barge or whatever it was called was a very cramped area. You're right. All of the Fields of Mourning is like 2 to 3 times the size of what some of Asphodel's rooms were.
And unlike the other rooms where you just get dropped in, other areas you get dropped in, there's one reward, you're going to get attacked as soon as you enter the room. In the Fields of Mourning, there are usually 2 to 3 rewards in every room. And until you try to claim the reward, you're pretty safe. Like, you can kind of wander around, and there are actually like minor bonuses just kind of lying around for you to find, which I thought was a cool way to take the same mechanics and tweak it to make it still feel like a unique level experience instead of just more Hades. You know, I thought it was a nice tweak. Final boss there, you fight Cerberus, but he's sad. He's sad because Hades got captured. Did any of you appreciate that fight?
Yeah.
Yes, because we don't actually kill Cerberus. We cleanse him, and then he scampers off every time.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're like, oh, that's my family's dog, and it's 3-headed giant angry dog. You're like, he's just a little puppy. He's
no
my little
Cerberuses
doggy.
were harmed in the making of Hades 2.
Yes. Only the infernal beast was harmed. And that's not Cerberus.
That's not the Cerberus we know and love.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final area is Hades proper. You get into the kind of chambers, the inner sanctum of... Is it Tartarus or is it...
Tartarus. It's Tartarus.
Yeah, you go to Tartarus, and the final boss there, you can run into your dad, and he'll give you a buff. You run into Kronos, he's the final boss of the area, and true to all video games now, there's a first form and a second form. Was everyone able to beat Kronos at least once?
Yes.
I got to the second form, and then I died.
Oh.
I've got to phase 2 and haven't beat phase 2 yet.
Okay, I've beaten him once. And then decided to focus on the other sections. I thought it was a good fight. Pete, did you have any tips?
I enjoyed it.
For your people?
Oh God, just slam your head against it until like you finally get enough resources to win. Yeah, my victory wasn't elegant. It was brute force as usual.
Okay. Yeah, I would say right now it's hard to even give advice because a bunch of this stuff's going to change, I'm sure, before the game comes out. But right now it seems like who's the god who does like anvil stuff?
Hephaestus. Yep.
Hephaestus seems really good right now. And the fire goddess.
Hestia.
Goddess of the hearth.
Those two seem very, very good right now. And especially if you get both of them.
Yep.
Like they play very nicely together. So that was my secret.
I want to go down the rabbit hole of how they changed and have implemented God boons later. I don't want to do that right now. Because I'm gonna go off on some of these. I have things that I love and things that I hate strongly.
Okay, excellent. And then there's an above ground area you can go to. You are getting told that Kronos is attacking on two fronts. He's taken over Hades and he's attacking Mount Olympus. And so you eventually will get a ability to like remove your curse so you can exist on the surface for a little bit. You can go to a town that is under siege. That town is kind of structured like the last area, I believe, of Hades 1, the temple, where like you are picking between rooms that have boons in them. And then each of those rooms, like you get like 8 or 9 to choose from, and you only get to choose 6. And then you just go into those rooms, you get the boons you want, and then you fight a Cyclops at the end of that.
Polyphemus.
Yeah, Polyphemus. Yep. He's a jerk. He's not that bad, but he wants to eat sheeps, and you're trying to stop him from eating sheeps. That fight. You also run into Heracles in here. He's a jerk. Pete, is he canonically a jerk?
Yes, pretty much.
Absolutely.
He kills his whole family, which isn't really his fault. He was brainwashed. But even outside of that, yes, he's a jerk. So is Odysseus, though. Like, he's also a jerk.
Well, in this game, he's your nice guide.
He's just hanging out.
Yeah. They retconned Odysseus.
Okay.
Odysseus was a jerk to like Polyphemus and the sirens, and he was just trying to get home. He's fine.
Yeah, Polyphemus doesn't. When you talk about how you're friends with Odysseus, he's like
doesn't like
thrilled
that
about it.
Yeah,
he's like, the guy who ripped my eye out is gonna get what he has coming to him. And then the last section that exists right now, you go on some boats to try to get to Mount Olympus, and that ends with a fight against Eris, the goddess of strife. And she's got a machine. She's got a gun. She's got your gun from the first game.
Yep.
The adamant rail, I believe is what it was called.
She's got the rail, and she will shoot you with it. And she was probably the most difficulty I had with a boss in this game, because her mechanic is after you do a certain amount of damage, she just shoots a big missile in the air and then increases her damage output by 100%. And she just does this multiple times throughout the fight.
That feels unfair.
So like at first she hits for 3, and then by the end of it she's hitting for like 12 or 15 per hit, and she's got a shotgun blast. So don't be close to her, or she'll deal like 100 damage in one shot.
Just don't get hit.
Don't get hit. That was how I beat her. Was I just
seems like a skill issue.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of
classic
boons that might be too good, Hestia has a boon that when you sprint, it gets rid of any and all bullets that are coming at you, and they include all of the bullets she shoots. So as long as you're sprinting, she can't hurt you, except with AoE attacks. So that's something. That's a tip you can use to beat her. But she is not. She's not simple, I would say. She can kill you very quickly. All right. So Billy, you had some things to say about boons?
I did, and generally what I have to say kind of rolls into the conversation about like how the game's flow is in terms of like the runs and the combat, what they've done to try to change things from Hades 1 to Hades 2. And so I think how I want to launch this is like how did the returning gods change? And so, we lost Dionysus, we lost Ares, we lost Athena, Artemis changed from one kind of encounter to another. There's like a couple different tweaks, and I would say with one exception, I think every returning god got worse, and I don't know how I feel about it, because part of what like part of what made me want to pick up Hades 2 is I'm like, oh, I loved Hades 1 and I loved the kind of combat that I experienced. And this might come off as a gripe because it's just different and it was better the old way. And I sound like a crotchety old man. It's like, I liked it the old way. But I think some of the gods that were good in Hades 1 were recognized as being really good and got nerfed kind of into oblivion. So a couple of examples that I think are really painfully present here is like Zeus and Poseidon got really, really worse. Zeus had an ability before, actually had like two main attack modifiers. One was the chain lightning, which still exists and is still really good. But the other one was like a shock effect that if an enemy attacked, they would take damage. And then like Zeus had a couple of really awesome attack modifiers that, depending on what weapon you were using, could have scaled really, really well. But now the Zeus ability, which I think is called Blitz, feels like it needs a rework. It's kind of similar to the Ares boons from the first game, where after a certain threshold they would take a burst of damage. But now that's kind of what Hephaestus's boons do, where enemies will take a burst of damage after a certain amount of time. But for Zeus's ability, it's Blitz, and it's like an enemy has to take 120 damage, and then they'll take a burst of damage. But you have 3 seconds to deal that 120 damage. So it's really difficult to use that effectively, especially in the early phases of the game. Like in the first 2 biomes, you're not dealing 120 damage in 3 seconds to most enemies.
Especially with, like, there are some weapons that can.
Like
but
the
if you're
axe
on
could do that.
Yeah, the axe can do it, but if you're using the, like, 2 torches, you're not doing that.
No.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a dead boon. And you're almost like, oh, crap, I don't want to see this god in the next room because all their boons are bad on this weapon. In Hades 1, I don't think there was any god for any weapon where you were just, like, there was no way you could build into it effectively. And I feel like we're actually a little bit there now for Hades 2. Poseidon's effect is kind of what it was before, but some of the boons that I was looking for in Hades 1 didn't come back. Poseidon has like knockback effects and push away effects and kind of splash area effects, but they are almost they almost work against themselves, because when you want those effects to pop off, you want it to be on a tight cluster of enemies, but they'll push the enemies away from each other, so now it renders itself less effective. So that, I think, could use a rework. Weirdly enough, Demeter got better. Demeter was pretty trash in Hades 1, but Demeter having a
goddess of winter.
Yeah, the goddess of winter. She had like a chill effect in Hades 1, which is you would damage enemies, they would gain stacks of chill, and if they got to all 10 stacks, they would like temporarily freeze. Now it's just any enemy freezes for like 2 seconds and it resets on a cooldown. That's better, but still kind of bad. It's way better than it was before, but still kind of bad. It seems like the gods that are the best right now don't have like a unique attack modifier. They just help you deal damage faster with no like elemental affinity, or in a bigger area, or like chain damage from one enemy to the other. Like, so I'm talking about like Hera, Apollo, and Hermes are probably the best, just like straight up good boons to get, but they don't add like a flavor to your attacks. They just say your attacks are faster now, or your attacks are bigger now.
Hermes is nothing but really generic attack speed increase, like enemy projectile speed down.
Yes.
Get more money from any money pile you get. Like, they're just super generic, but really good.
But all really, really good. And Apollo's is usually like area of effect. Like your attacks get an AoE, and he does have a status effect which is blinded or whatever. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a blind effect where enemies will have a mischance against you. And Hera's ability is if you hit 2 enemies, they'll become like linked together, and when you damage enemy number 1, a percentage of that damage is duplicated onto enemy number 2. And that can happen for like 10 enemies. Like, it's really good.
It's really good in crowd control, really bad in boss
really
fights.
Useless in boss fights.
Bad in boss fights. But that's where you get to boon pairing being really important. And I actually think Hephaestus is pretty bad. Like, Hephaestus is only good against bosses.
But
because
those are the hardest things to kill. I can skill my way around all the mobs.
right. So a big thing about Hades 1 is certain boons and certain boon effects scaled very differently in earlier phases of the game, like earlier playthroughs and later playthroughs. Great example was the hangover effect, which is the poison effect from Hades 1, now kind of replaced by the scorch effect that you get from Hestia. I applaud Supergiant Games for making an analog to the poison effect that's like different enough, because scorch is very different than how the poison typed hangover effect was in Hades 1. And I think Hephaestus's effect, where every like 8 or 10 seconds your next attack of this type deals like an explosion of damage, is trying to mimic or like build off of what Ares did in the first game. But I think Hephaestus's is probably going to need a rework later, because I'm thinking like super long term in the development of Hades 1. You got things like heat, where you can make the game harder. Enemies got more health. Enemies moved faster. Enemies had armor that would like soak up one hit of damage. And so now Hephaestus's ability, which is pretty good against mobs if you can clump them up close, and good against bosses, is now going to become like worse as the game scales pretty severely. So there's
single
some
lumps of damage aren't as
single lumps of damage just don't work in harder iterations of the game like they will now. And so I'm noticing kind of throughout the lifespan of Hades 1 how some of the gods changed and how some of the boons, the like specific boon interactions changed. And I'm thinking I already see a lot of room for growth in some of the gods.
Yeah,
So,
and I would say, like, to that effect as well, Hephaestus, he's the god that gives you the most added bonus damage to armor. And right now, there are entire areas where you might see a handful of enemies that even have armor. Like, sometimes you'll see upgraded enemies, but most of them won't be. I assume that when you play on higher fear, which is the heat equivalent in this game, you will eventually have one that's like, enemies all have armor. And then Hephaestus becomes great, because you get like, 200% damage to shields. Everything has shields. So now it's universally applicable.
yes.
The run where I got the furthest, I got a Hephaestus boon that was like, deal 80% of a target's armor. And you just delete armor. So that was pretty good.
Yeah. And right now, like with low fear or no fear runs, those mechanics, those boons are not especially useful. Like it's not, they don't have enough armor for me to care about specific armor targeting. And I'm sure as this ramps up, it'll be good. Pete, any boons jump out to you? Pete?
Well, I was going to say, Billy, speaking of god changes, do you remember if Aphrodite was nude in Hades 1?
Yes. So
she was.
Okay.
She was
Okay,
less
so
nude.
They kept some good
somehow.
stuff for the fans.
She's actually surprisingly more naked now.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of weird. Like the strategically placed hair
in the shape of a heart.
In the shape of a heart. Somehow got more strategically placed. Is that how you would say it?
This is an important question that I probably should have asked up top. Is Hades 2 hornier than Hades 1 was?
I think it is.
I would like to weigh in on this.
Yes. Em?
Please.
I think Hades 2, they decided like, we made a lot of really nice guys. We're going to make one for the ladies. And so they made like Nemesis and Aphrodite and a bunch of, even Chaos, who is like gender neutral, is now in like a more feminine looking form, which is interesting. So I think they were like, this one's for the girls.
Selene and Artemis are also part of like the virgin like girl club.
Yeah.
Like they have their little like secret club of like
Silver
Dark
Sisters.
Silver Sisters club, and I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm here for it. Cool.
Okay, all right.
And there's a bathhouse now. So like your Melanoy and character X will get naked and then jump in a bath. Though the portraits are like shoulders up for the most part. So like at most you see, you know, a peck or maybe like the implication of cleavage. My favorite bath scene so far was when you took Dora, who's the shade
Yeah.
who haunts your room, because she doesn't experience heat.
Yeah, she's like, do I want to float above some warm water? Hell yeah, I do. It's very funny.
So she's good. We didn't mention there's a new like pet mechanic too.
Oh yeah.
Your familiars, right?
Yeah, you can get familiars. So right now there's only 2, I think. There's your little frog buddy, and then you can get a cat.
Yeah.
Familiar.
What does the cat do? I never actually found the
Attacks
cat.
things.
Oh, okay.
It attacks things more aggressively than Freenos, the frog, does.
Yeah. Freenos is just for getting shades on your side.
Yeah, he does damage things if he hops on them, but it's not
That's
like
true.
a lot of damage.
Yeah.
And I will say the different boon, like you can upgrade those familiars further too. So like if you give them multiple familiar treats, they will get better at whatever they do. So like Freenos can deal more damage. He can make it so shades show up more often, or he gives you even more HP boost. So just in case there weren't enough things to unlock, like you can upgrade your weapons, you can unlock weapons, you can upgrade the power of your weapons, you can upgrade the power of your resource extraction, your familiars, your boons. It's a lot.
It's kind of the equivalent to what I think was called chthonic companions in Hades 1. They were kind of like they were in the keepsake box of Hades 1, and you could get what was basically a little stuffed animal that represented a critter, and I think it was like 2 or 3 times per full run you could like summon like a little assist monster to do an attack.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, they had different properties. Boldy was my favorite from the first one.
I miss Boldy.
But it seems like the familiars are trying to fill that same slot.
Mm-hmm.
So props to them for like echoing what Hades 1 players know and love, but revamping it and giving it a new flavor.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
One more thing that I wanted to bring up, which was kind of back into the boons conversation. I wanted to so I had a lot of some like critical things to say about the boons. I forgot to shout out the thing that I love the most, which is I'm kind of sad to see that what seems to be like individual god-based ultimates are gone, and now we have the moon hexes. But I love how there's like an upgrade tree for the hexes. That's a feature that I think is a brilliant expansion upon the first game. It feels different but very fresh, because some of the ultimates from Hades 1 were just clearly bad or like worse versions of another. For example, the Ares ultimate compared to the Poseidon ultimate, like there was no reason to ever choose the Ares ultimate if you could either get the Zeus or the Poseidon ultimate instead. Or like even the the Athena ultimate, where you're just like an invincible bubble for like 5 seconds. Okay, lame. Like, and as Gino once said to me, as I was a young nascent Magic the Gathering player, you having unlimited health or being untouchable doesn't kill your opponent, and you win the game by killing your opponent unless you're a combo player. But yeah, like not dying doesn't mean you're winning. So ultimates like Poseidon and Zeus and the Artemis ultimate were like head and shoulders above the rest in Hades 1. The modifications they made in Hades 2, where you have a couple of ultimates to choose from and then you can upgrade them to suit your needs, I think is a chef kiss improvement.
Yep.
I also think of Gino telling me the best way to win is not to dirtle around with trying to protect yourself. Just kill your opponent. Also in a Magic situation.
Gino's never given me a single useful piece of advice in his entire life.
That's fair.
I remember being in martial arts club with Gino and sparring with one of our friends, and Gino saying in the background, "Don't get hit. punch that guy before he punches you. These were
good.
wise words.
Brilliant.
It's always good to have Gino in your corner, Pete. Maybe one day you'll unlock
Yeah.
that like friendship dialogue.
I'm saving my best stuff, Pete. I've got some stuff percolating. It's gonna change your life. Any closing thoughts on Hades 2?
I have one more topic that I wanted to talk about.
Okay. All right.
It shouldn't be too lengthy, but an issue that I'm experiencing right now with Hades 2 is the general pace of combat is very different, and I'm not sure how it's going to land with the Hades 1 audience. So,
in what sense?
Yeah, this is kind of a difference between Melanoy and how they're trying to paint her as a clever caster witch like character, as opposed to Zagreus, who is a headstrong, beat down, rush down kind of fighter.
Oh yeah, we didn't even say she's got a cast button that like creates a circle that slows down all enemies in it.
Hate
That's
it.
Completely new. You don't like it?
I have one change that I would recommend. It needs to be aimable, like one of the boons makes you do. I think that just has to be default, that you can aim it. It could be a small radius around you, but I think it has to have like hold, aim, and then it pops up instead of just you press it and it radiates from around you and then you can leave. Ugh, okay, that's separate. Not what I'm talking about. Hades 1, I think, had a perfect speed at which you would play the game. It was fast paced. It was, all the controls were super tight. All the controls were crisp, and most of your moves like canceled really well into each other. And the better you got at Hades 1, and the more you gained knowledge about how the boons interacted and buffed you, I think the game just got faster and faster and faster, to the point where I was finishing runs in the teens number of minutes in like Hades 1. Like, it was crazy. Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but like 20 minutes or like high teens minutes might be a reasonable time frame. Hades 2 feels way slower to me, and I've seen what some of the people in the Discord have been saying, people on like Reddit and other forums have been saying, and the community seems kind of divided on this. Some people are saying that it feels too clunky. There are some parts of the games that are just like chunky and slow, or they're saying that like the weapons from their main attack to their special to the cast feel kind of discordant, like they don't mesh well. I'll give two examples. One, I hope that the torches get more interesting, because the torches kind of have a straight line, shoot a ball of fire, and like a ball of fire circles around you, and that's kind of it. Like, there's not a lot of strategic positioning. Well, there is some with the torches, but the torches seem very like, what am I looking for? I'm looking for more.
So for the torches, for me, what I've noticed, and to see if this speaks to what you're saying, you're just kind of holding down the attack button and slowly waddling around. And as you hold down the attack button, eventually your attacks go from like small and weak to bigger, but doing the exact same thing, right? Like either it's costing you MP to attack or not. But you're not like dodging around and being especially flashy in how you play. Your positioning doesn't matter all that much. You just need to be out of attack range of your enemies.
Yes.
And just kind of like slowly spamming fireballs at your opponent is just not that fun when compared to, you know, the axe has like a shield mode. It does a lot of damage.
Like a parry, and it's big and splashy with its damage, and the charge attacks are satisfying. Or like the spear or the trident or whatever it is, like instead of you thrusting with the spear, the staff is, instead of you like thrusting with the staff, your charge does like a shockwave, and instead of you throwing a little like arrow of energy with the spear, you charge up to create like a ball of AoE damage. That's different and cool. But I think of weapons like the blade, like the sister blades or whatever they're called, kind of matching
the daggers.
Yeah, like the sister daggers or whatever. It's like a sickle and a knife, kind of matching what the Fists of Malphas did in Hades 1, but their special seems off. Like the special's more of like a spread of like a bow of like what the bow was in Hades 1, and I'm like, these don't really go together. I don't see how these fit. They could be built around really well, but it seems like some of the weapons are kind of Frankenstein-y right now.
Yeah, I think that they've definitely got some things to iron out, and I would agree that the torch is probably the one that I expect to change the most between initial release and later. Because, like you said, the attack and the special are barely different. Like, one of them just circles, one of them is just a line
straight.
drive.
It's like
That's
straight versus circle. And I'm noticed, and something that I'm feeling that I'm really, really missing is, even though we have maybe they want this to be a little bit painful so that you will use the sprint feature, but I just feel like Mel is slower than Zagreus, and I'm missing it a little bit. I want to zip around and like rush down people, but I think Mel just isn't a rush down player.
I think you need to have the Sister Blades is it. Like that's the rush down
that's
option.
it. But see, we had the fists, we had the shield, we had even the spear. Spear you were kind of at range, but even the sword and the spear were like strong mid-range options, and like I'm missing some of that. But maybe that's just my.
This game has one close-up option, 2 ranged options, and then 2 mid-range options. So there's just fewer in that range, and there's one weapon missing. So maybe we end up with another one ending up being a melee option. Who knows?
So the community is either like, oh, Mel is different from Zagreus. We like this because she's really positional and strategic, and there's more of like a rhythm, like a tempo with how you cycle through Melinoy's attack cooldowns and stuff. And some people are saying this is a step down because we want the Hades experience that we know and love, which is like everything's fast paced, like everything's tight, super responsive, everything cancels into each other. There's very short cooldowns and stuff. And even stuff like just the dash feels slower and kind of worse than Zagreus's dash from Hades 1. I'm not saying it makes it a worse game, but
the tempo
I've noticed it. Yeah, the tempo is different, and I've noticed it. So it's going to feel slower than Hades 1. I'm on the fence about it now, but I trust Supergiant to make a really good finished product.
And this is also like literally in the first patch, they changed what canceled into what. Like some of these cancels changed. So it's entirely possible that they're going to sort out some of the canceling and move priorities and speeds, and then we'll end up with a more dialed in game in 6 months. So we'll see. We'll see how it evolves. Any closing thoughts, Pete or M?
I think we've all talked about sort of the good things already. I think I'm excited to see where they go for the finish. I expect nothing but upward trajectories.
Excellent. M, any closing thoughts?
Man, I use the torches every time.
Cowardly. That's cowardly.
I'll have to try something else. I will say, usually after we talk about a game, I very rarely go back to it. But I'm already like, man, I really want to try something different. I want to get back in there. Yeah.
That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that I think brings us to my pick. It's now my pick again, isn't it?
It is, Gino.
I have options for you.
Ooh.
Okay.
So I have 2 choices. One of them is kind of a dating sim and kind of a nightmare factory.
Okay.
Did Hotiful Boyfriend make a sequel?
Yeah.
No.
Dating is a nightmare factory.
And the other
Not
one's
that many of us know anymore.
The other one's a card game that is very cleverly written.
Pete doesn't like card games.
I know Pete doesn't like card games, but I'm giving you. There's 2 out. It's a cleverly written card game, or a very lesbian dating sim.
These are the two most Gino.
Hold on.
Yeah, you
most Gino games I've heard of.
It's also a nightmare. It's also got nightmares.
You're telling me I can get lesbians dating and nightmares in one place?
Yes.
I think it's a shoe in here. I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of shoe in, is that what we're leaning towards?
Sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of shoe in, you've picked Little Goody Two Shoes.
I knew it. I set you up for that one.
Excellent. Good. That's good co-hosting. Thank you, Em. Good alley-oop. You threw it up so I could throw it down. Thank you. Pete,
Are we gonna
Billy,
guess?
you were making a face. Do you know anything about this game?
I remember why I left this show.
Is there foot content? Ooh, 10 out of 10 on Steam.
It's
Oh no.
This was highly regarded by ZP, so
it was.
Oh, well,
And we'll-
say no more.
we'll see what happens.
I started it. I haven't finished it. Yeah, the other game was going to be Cobalt Core, which is it's a deck builder that's got scalies and furries in it.
Well,
but
we
it's
should have
also
you had
said
led
Scalies
with the
and furries.
furries. You know,
Scary.
Sorry.
What are like birds? What are birds called? Featheries?
avians?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I gotta look up what
Just
bird fairies are called.
avians.
Fowlies?
Okay, hold on. These are barely like. All right, I'm not gonna get into what constitutes a furry on this podcast.
Not today.
Yeah, they're avians
Um,
or featheries.
Ugh.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Pete, for telling us
You're
that.
welcome. Yep. Two
Thank
fun
you,
facts
Em.
in one podcast.
Thank you,
Thank-
Em.
Thank you. Don't at me about if these are furries or not. I know what I'm about.
And thank you, Billy.
Wow. I'm so glad I could be on another episode of the Deep Listens podcast. Thanks everybody for
Yeah.
having me. I really appreciate the invite. Love Hades 2, the artwork, Chef Kiss, Gen Z art director, Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett are geniuses in music. Greg Kasavin's development is awesome. Like this game is going to be awesome. I had some harsh criticisms, but it's because I love this company and will, it comes from a place of love. So thinking back
Yeah,
on our
it's-
conversation, I hope it doesn't sound like I was bashing too hard. It's like
No.
I love
No,
it so
no.
much. I want it to be
It's
the
an-
best version.
It's an
Yeah,
early access game.
early access,
It's
yeah,
allowed
it's
to
early
have
access.
things that need to be polished. It happens. And congratulations on the kid on the way as well. Woo!
Yep.
And thank you, listeners. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. And you can support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. Until next time, peace.
Break